This is the 2026 Chevrolet Traverse Z71, the rugged off-road focused version of Chevrolet's mid-size three-row SUV, which starts at $48,900. Now that's a pretty big step up from the base model LT's price of $40,800, but still a ways down from the top trim RS price of $55,000. Now while the Z71 is off-road focused, all of the attributes and changes for the Z71 that make it special are actually really fantastic for city and regular commuting driving, as it turns out, in ways that may not be immediately obvious on the surface. Under the hood, you're just going to have to hear me out. This is a turbocharged 2.5-liter four-cylinder, and I know not everybody's the fan of the idea of having a four-cylinder in your larger SUV, especially an American one at that, but this is a larger displacement engine at 2.5 liters, and it's a dual overhead cam engine, which is the stuff of performance. And because of that, it produces a very respectable 328 horsepower and 326 pound-feet of torque, which is what some V8s were making 10 years ago. So to me, that is very respectable. On top of that, it's paired with a modern, smooth-shifting 8-speed automatic transmission, which works with clever gear ratios to produce respectable powertrain operation. Where it gets really interesting is the drivetrain. The Traverse is standard front-wheel drive, but the Z71 is also all-wheel drive, and the way they do that is by using a twin clutch system that can actually switch between front-wheel drive and all-wheel drive with the push of a button. Now, why would you want to do this? Well, the answer is efficiency. See, in standard front-wheel drive driving, this will be more efficient. Once you switch it into the all-wheel drive button, it's actually going to burn more fuel, because that's just how the all-wheel drive system works. It takes more effort for the engine to turn all four wheels. Now, the advantage of that is it can be as efficient as you want, but the minute you go off-roading or see snow, you just push the button and now your vehicle's more capable in terms of traction. So that's very respectable, and that's why that system works the way it does. Now, specifically, we had to talk fuel economy, right? The cool part is this vehicle's rather efficient, into the 20s. It features an EPA-rated 20 miles per gallon city, 24 miles per gallon highway, and 21 miles per gallon combined. And given that it has a larger 21.7 gallon fuel tank in the all-wheel drive models like this one, you're talking about 450 miles combined for a tank, which is very, very impressive in my book. Surprisingly fuel efficient for a vehicle of this size, while still being very, very powerful. And it can even tow up to 5,000 pounds, so small trailers or even jet skis if you want. What you have here is a very respectable powertrain that is plenty powerful for hauling people or cargo even uphill, but still being relatively fuel efficient for a vehicle of this size, getting well into the 20s for fuel economy. So consider me rather impressed on this. Just don't get so hung up on the fact that it's a four-cylinder. Next, let's take a closer look at the exterior, and I want to mention that the exterior cosmetics do change slightly depending on what trim you choose, and I personally think that the Z71 is without a doubt the most handsome or most attractive version of the Traverse, and it just makes it look a little bit more rugged, particularly with heavy use of gloss black accents throughout. Now quickly, I do want to show you the key. It has, of course, lock unlock and panic button functionality, but you also get remote start and the ability to power open the rear hatch remotely, which is a nice touch. Moving into the vehicle itself, this one is sterling gray metallic, and the Traverse Z71 does have some upgrades, not just cosmetics, that actually improve its off-road characteristics. First, I want to mention that standard, the Traverse has 6.7 inches of ground clearance, but here with the Z71, you get an extra inch for a total of 7.76 inches of ground clearance. Now, does that make this thing a hardcore rock-crawling off-roader? Of course not. It's still a soft roader, but that extra ground clearance does mean you get more access to the rockier trails that might exist out there that you can definitely climb this thing over while you're on the way to a campsite or just for fun, whatever the case is. So it does improve things. You also get the fact that you get fully independent suspension underneath, which makes it easier to articulate everything along with that all-wheel drive. And you also get these 18-inch gloss black wheels wrapped in Goodyear Wrangler off-road tires, another just benefit of the standard new vehicle purchase, but of course you will change the tires throughout your ownership of the vehicle. Getting into the other specifics, starting up front here, we of course have the Z71 exclusive front fascia here, which does look more aggressive and comes with the Z71 badge. You get these bright red tow hooks, or recovery hooks I should say, and then you also have the DRLs up here with your headlights in the center, and then a little bit of a skid plate underneath, not necessarily meant for bashing rocks, but more so for just protecting the vehicle from any potential road debris or things like that. As you continue to the middle here, most of this is kind of standard for the Traverse, while the Z71 has things like the gloss black panoramic roof rails. You also get the option to purchase the available panoramic roof, which this car has. You also get cameras integrated in the front, sides here, and even the rear, while having these power mirrors with integrated turn signals. But then, from the luxury perspective, I like that you actually have full keyless entry on this vehicle, meaning you can access the front doors, the back doors, or even the rear hatch without having to take the key out of your pocket, which I think is a fantastic luxury touch, especially at this price point. Additionally, you get privacy tinted windows here in the back and the rear of the vehicle. Then as you continue around to the back, you can see it's kind of got a sporty looking spoiler there. You also have more cool lighting, Z71 badges, and even a cool dual exhaust, which you don't always get with a 4-cylinder powertrain, while still having the option to actually open up the rear hatch here, which of course is a power feature that you can use either on the gate itself or while using the key. So that's kind of the cool benefit. Moving on to the interior, this also has its own cool Z71 flair into it. So as Chevy calls it, this is a jet black interior with torch red accents. Torch red being an iconic Chevy color. You can see all of the contrast stitching here in the seats, also in the center console here, the steering wheel, and then even the very, very cool embroidered Z71 headrests here in the front. And the rear doesn't get the cool embroidered headrest, but you also get the same stitching throughout the rest of your 3 rows. Up front here, you have some extra luxuries. You can see these seats themselves are actually quite comfortable. They're quite wide, but still provide some support here and bolstering in both the legs and the sides of the seats. It's of course power adjustable here for the driver's seats. Both of the front seats are also heated, along with the steering wheel, which is a nice touch. The other cool part is just the material themselves is actually supposed to be a bit more durable and obviously ideal for also taking off-road if you decide to do that. But then the other cool part is just the overall care that Chevy's taken for both the front and the rear, even giving this vehicle 3-zone climate control, meaning the front has their own 2 separate adjustments for the driver and passenger, but then even separate adjustments for the rear. Now with that, I also want to show you the door. You have this sort of almost carbon fiber simulated like material, but it's really just smooth and has this cool gradient that also goes across all the way to the passenger side. You also have power windows with auto for the driver, power mirror adjustments, your rear hatch, some pockets, and even the Bose sound system always being a nice upgrade. Even the Chevrolet and the door sill is a pretty nice luxurious touch to some extent. With that, let's go ahead and climb in, and we can go ahead and fire it up using the start-stop button here. And you can see everything roar to life with your big digital display in front. Now, this is a pretty interesting setup. You have 2 separate screens here, but they are kind of interlinked to give it a more seamless look. And this is something that GM as a whole is really using. You'll also see it kind of simulated in Cadillacs, albeit with similar screens that are much larger across the entire deck here. But it is a very smooth display. It feels very, very modern here on the inside. Some of the first details, the steering wheel, for example, I love this steering wheel. First of all, it's special because it says Z71, but then it's also really thick, far thicker than you would find in most vehicles, but not so thick that it becomes too much. I feel like it's a very comfortable steering wheel at that. You have your heated steering wheel controls, but you could also get the option for GM's Super Cruise, one of the best in the game at that. And that's their adaptive cruise control. It can even change lanes for you, which is all super cool in terms of the actual features that are available. And you can, of course, get that here as well. You also have your adjustment for your infotainment, your heated steering wheel controls here. You also have paddle shifters to manually shift through the transmission if you want. And then behind the stocks here are the wipers and turn signal on the left. And on the right side, surprisingly, is actually your gear shift lever. And so you can see it even has instructions printed on the lever itself. So you actually pull it down to put the vehicle in drive, and then you push it up to put it in reverse, and you push this button here on the outside, and that puts the vehicle in park. So there's a couple other vehicles from even other manufacturers that have a similar use case, and this is something that's kind of becoming more popular, almost like a modern version of the old style column shifted vehicle. So kind of a fun throwback. The other thing that I want to show you is actually the exciting buttons are over here on the left. So of course you have your electronic parking brake, but they put all the fun buttons here. You have your all-wheel drive button, which as I mentioned earlier is pretty critical for the functionality of this. All you have to do is simply push the all-wheel drive button, And you'll see there in the bottom, it switches the vehicle to all-wheel drive, and it does it almost instantly. And same thing, to take it out, you just simply push the button, and it puts the vehicle back in two-wheel drive. The other fun stuff that you'll find over here, or not so fun, is the auto start stop. Fortunately, that's an easy button to just turn that off, and then you no longer have to deal with the auto stop start. The other cool thing is this. The mode button is pretty self-explanatory, and that is your driving modes displayed over here on the center screen. So you push that button, and you have a variety of modes here, and fairly intuitive is also the fact that you can go either direction and it comes back around, which is nice. You can see you have a normal driving mode. You also have a sport mode, which will try to hold the gears out, off-road mode, terrain mode, and you can see how those affect and remove the traction control, and even a tow haul mode. So it's pretty helpful that you have a variety of different drive modes that make it a little bit easier to know exactly what the car is going to do, and the car will set itself up so you don't have to think about it in a way to sort of anticipate based on what your driving might look like. The main digital display right in front of the driver is really easy to read. It has all of the information you want, including your gear select. You can actually, of course, adjust the displays depending on what you want in front of you, whether that be your maps or information on the vehicle. The range is nice and big and obvious. The way that the fonts and things sort of stand out to you makes it really easy just to take a quick look at the gas mileage, for example, or even the speed, just making it a fairly intuitive vehicle so your eyes aren't straining, you know, trying to look at the various metrics that are being displayed in front of you. Over here, obviously they went a totally different direction because this feels like a massive TV space. This is definitely a large display, and I also like the way that it was done here. So they've done away with a lot of the buttons here. You still have some buttons here in the bottom, most of which are here strictly for adjusting your climate control. Things like the fan speed are found right here in the middle, and as you can see, it adjusts there. But you can also use the touchscreen itself if you don't want the physical buttons, and then the separate temperature adjustments here for both the driver's controls and in the passenger's adjustments over here, which you can either sync up or adjust separately. With your heated seat controls are actually found here inside the touchscreen. The touchscreen itself is nice. Of course, wireless CarPlay, Android Auto, but also Google integration. That is something I like to see. As you can see there with the Play Store, I also like the fact that that means you can get things like Google Maps, because in my experience, most of the factory systems that exist for navigation just aren't great, and they take you to weird spots and not necessarily always the correct destination, but you can rely on stuff like Google integration to get you to the right place. Now, being the Z71, you also get a couple other cool features. First of all, cameras. You can't go wrong with cameras. As you can see here, you have all sorts of different options that allow you to look at all sorts of different stuff that can be helpful for parking, off-roading, or even towing, like you see here with the hitch camera. So super helpful. Love to have that. But then also are the off-road stuff. And you can see here, you have a very cool display. This is stuff that GM's been using across the line. Even the Hummer EV has a lot of cool stuff like this in terms of how they display everything that's going on. But it's really just the basics, the important stuff, and it's just really fun to look at, you know, and pull it up while you're off-roading anyways. So all of that is pretty intuitive. The system itself is quite easy to use. As you can see here, there's no issues. Everything's pretty straightforward. It's responsive. It's pretty obvious as well what it's telling you about, and you even have these quick navigation tabs at the top here with your volume knob kind of integrated, but also reminding you that you have steering wheel controls to also adjust some of that as well. Below that, we have chargers, both some plug-in ports there in the back in addition to a wireless charger, cup holders, a little pocket here, and then you also get this little storage box here so you can move this tray around if you want. But then you have this cup holder design. I really like this cup holder design because obviously it's also intended to be used for the back seat, but if nobody's in the back seat and you need additional cup holder space for both the front and the back on a road trip, for example, then the people in the front can use these just as easily. So that feels very, very intuitive. As you can see here, you have the very clean design with that sort of fake carbon fiber. You do get a glove box in this car. The passenger door is, of course, similar to the driver door. Up top here, you get these very large sun visors, which is important. Some sun visors are far too small and don't actually cover you from the sun, and they're even backlit. And then over here, you, of course, have your sort of sunglass holder up top. You also have a variety of different controls here for the optional panoramic sunroof, which, again, not every car will come equipped with, but this one has it as well. With that, let's hop in the back. Moving on to the back, there's some important things to talk about because the Traverse is actually offered with two different seating arrangements. You can either get a 7-seat configuration, which is what you'll find in the Z71, or an 8-seat configuration. And so this one is 7 seats because you actually have the captain's chairs here in the second row. The benefit of that is this, of course, a more adult professional setup that also actually provides easier access to getting into the back seats should you need them. However, I do want to point out the legroom here in the back, as this is a mid-size 3-row SUV, and albeit it is on the larger size of mid-size, the third row is still a little bit cramped. I would say it's going to be perfect for small children or in cases of emergency, and of course still has plenty of cargo room back there should you need it. But these seats are also plenty comfortable in the Z71, and we have that 3-zone adjustments that I talked about earlier, which you see right here in the back of the center console for those rear passengers. They also get similar luxuries with the Bose speaker system continuing throughout the back of the vehicle, and you can see headrests for even the third row, which is very, very nice. Now, how does it actually fit? Well, myself, I am 6 foot even for reference, and as you can see with me back here, I have no issues with headroom, and even with the front seat actually set up for me, I have a ton of space between me and the seat up front, so I could easily sit back here for very long extended road trips. I don't think I'd fit in the back unless I really needed to squeeze in there, like I said, for emergency situations, but overall, this is a very, very practical family hauler vehicle, and the idea of using this for both a highway crawler, as I'll talk about more so the driving section, these are really comfortable vehicles to be in. Let's punch it. So it sounds like a 4-cylinder, but once it gets going, I think it accelerates and it picks up really well, which goes back to my earlier statement of not having any issues. It's a surprisingly powerful engine. It just doesn't sound fantastic when you have the radio off and you hear nothing but 4-cylinder noises. But the engine itself is just fine. It moves this thing along fantastically. I think that's aided by the fact that you have a 8-speed gearbox, which obviously having multiple gears mean you can shorten those gear ratios and change all that to also further improve the overall interaction with the powertrain itself. Now, getting into the exciting stuff and the benefits of a Z71. Now, yes, this is the off-road rugged version of the Traverse, but here's the real secret hidden benefit that people don't always talk about when it comes to off-road vehicles. Off-road vehicles usually have this sort of softer sprung suspension for off-roading. But the secret to that is it's really, really good even on road, especially if your roads are bad. You'd be surprised just how comfortable it is sitting in one of these off-road vehicles and what it's like to cruise on them. That's why you see so many people just daily driving a lot of off-road vehicles like the ZR2s, Raptors, etc. It doesn't matter. They all daily drive those vehicles because they're that comfortable. And I feel like that's the same for this. This vehicle has been incredibly comfortable to be driving around. Doesn't matter if I was up north, where the roads get destroyed because it snows up there, or even down here in Phoenix where I just have these regular cruising roads that have speed bumps everywhere, etc. I found this vehicle to be incredibly smooth and comfortable everywhere. It just kind of feels like cruising in a Cadillac to some extent, but it's a Z71. It's an off-road Chevy Traverse. So it's incredibly comfortable from that regard and surprisingly fun to drive. Additionally, the noise cancellation and other available features on the inside also make it pleasant to be in. The other cool part is just the actual interaction with the vehicle itself. I find the steering wheel, it's thicker than most steering wheels, but I find it be quite comfortable, easy to use, comfortable to hold in your hand. Same thing with the seats, and just all of that interaction seems to be very, very comfortable with this vehicle. So there's a lot to like there. The other thing is like the overall restrictions or sometimes visibility issues that comes with having larger vehicles. That doesn't seem to be a problem here. I feel like I can see out the back quite easily. Same thing, the rear view mirror feels like there's no restrictions in terms of looking throughout the vehicle, no blind spots on the side, A-pillars aren't restrictive, all sorts of stuff like that. So it's actually kind of a really just pleasant vehicle to drive. It's nice and quiet, all sorts of benefits. And so I think this is quite an impressive vehicle. The off-road characteristics make it so much better for regular usage than people would think on the surface. But then you aid it with the available options. I think this is a very well-equipped vehicle. Now, is it on the pricier side? Yeah, but you could definitely spend more money on the Traverse, and I think this is a pretty good, like, happy medium. I think if you're looking at the Traverse, this specifically comes off to me as the one to have. Even if you don't plan on off-roading it, it looks the best in my opinion, but then it's also aided by the other features. And like I said, you'd be surprised just how comfortable the off-road vehicles are for regular driving use, and I think that's the secret benefit, if you will. Yeah, the engine just doesn't sound the best here on the inside, but at least there's not like pumped in extra stuff that you don't need in this. It's really just kind of straightforward and function first. The gear shift lever is something that feels a little bit awkward, but you get used to quite quickly. The screens themselves, all being right in front of you, is nice and easy to interact with. I will say if I had to complain about something, it would be that for me personally, with where I'm comfortable seating position wise, the main displays feel a little bit low. Just for being able to glance down and glance up, but I don't have any issues interacting or using anything. This vehicle's just been a nice pleasure to drive. I've enjoyed a lot of the experiences with it, and interacting with it's been fantastic. The only thing is I feel like people would get caught up on the paper specs of this vehicle, and that's not doing enough credit to it itself. Because it's nice. I like this thing. It's just amazing to think about how much the Traverse has changed over the years to give us what we have here. But with that, that's the end of the video. My suggestion is, if you're going to look at a Traverse, look at the Z71. It seems like it offers the most in terms of overall comfort and capability. It looks the best, and it has plenty of available options and features, so you can even spice it up a little bit more if you want to spend more money on your Traverse than the $48,900 that the Z71 already starts at. But with that, that's the end of the video. If you enjoyed it and could leave me a thumbs up, I'd really appreciate it, and consider getting subscribed for more content like this in the future. With that, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.